question. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up. You got to pump it up. Don't you know, pump it up.
Happy Wednesday, as I am getting a signal that the internet.
Here we go. Part 2.
We'll make it. We'll be fine. It'll be just fine. Brian Petrosky. I haven't seen that name in here in a while. What's up, stranger? Good to see you. Lydia. Bobby is in the house from the Facebook page. As always, Matt Kirby is in the house here to drag you, Trent, which we love week in and week out. Tyler, good to see you. We listen. I mean, we did a Monday show due to technical difficulties. We don't got to get into the specifics of what happened there, but Trent and I did sit down. We did an hour-long show on Monday. For whatever reason, we weren't able to get it out, and we'll just leave it at that. But we are back here on a Wednesday, Fan-Led Wednesday. This is my favorite show of the week because you guys lead the show. You pick the topics, you ask the questions. We do our best to get to everything, and usually you guys are extremely active in here. And to be honest, it's difficult to get through everything. So once again, my favorite show of the week, my favorite day of the week. And because we didn't really talk about Fresno State, we didn't look back on it, we didn't share our thoughts about that. We didn't, there's so much to talk about. The offensive line, the quarterback play. What about the wide receivers, the running backs, and then, of course, the Michigan defense. And from my understanding, Trent, I think there's a pretty big game taking place in Ann Arbor this weekend. So I've heard top 10 matchup, obviously, between Michigan and Texas in the Big House. Dude, how about how many superstars are going to be in Ann Arbor this weekend? As I was going through the list, I'm like, damn, man, like a couple Heisman Trophy winners, Derek Jeter, Matthew McConaughey. Like it's going to be like Hollywood in Ann Arbor this weekend. I know you're excited to get down there for it and just soak it all in. Are you feeling that juice that there's a big top 10 matchup that Ann Arbor is going to be the center of the college football world this weekend?
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Obviously, the last time game day was there was last year, and when Michigan hosted Ohio State, and we all know what happened then. But you're going to be on the sideline, so you're going to be up close and personal to Derek Jeter and all these big time stars. Are you going to take one of your hats and have him sign it for you?
Maybe. Do you think I can get Matthew McConaughey to like sign my hat, or just to like, would it be unprofessional as a photographer to take a selfie? I mean, if you're in the vicinity of Matthew McConaughey,
you got to do it. You got to do it.
Texas fan, I get it, but like, what is it? Interstellar? Was that the movie he was in? I mean, just so many incredible movies throughout the year. Yeah, there's a chance I may be a little starstruck. I don't know. I've gotten used to seeing Desmond in Ann Arbor and Charles Woodson to a certain extent. But yeah, man, I'm excited for it. I think this is going to be an incredible matchup. But I think that, we do need to talk a little bit about Fresno State. And I want to start off there because as I was at the game, and Trent, as you were up in the press box, I think at the end of the game, we all sort of had the same sense of what happened. And since then, my thought and my interpretation, particularly as it relates to the offense and the quarterback play, has evolved a little bit. But to be quite honest, I went on social media after the game and I looked at what people were saying, and I was surprised at the reaction. It was very doom and gloom. It was very really? Okay. Well, that's fair, Trent. That's fair. No, I was not surprised, but once again, like, fans were losing their minds. Sky is falling. This Michigan offense is this. We don't have a quarterback here. Trent, since we talked about it on Monday, but we didn't put out the show. Overall, now that it's Wednesday, you've had a few days to digest everything you saw. What are some of your takeaways from, who and what this Michigan team is coming out of week one?
I mean, like I was trying to tell all 100 million people that watch this show on a weekly basis, that Fresno State is a good, solid team that Michigan can't take it lightly. I mean, and they won 30-10. This is definitely a Fresno State team that could win 10 or 11 games this year and probably win the Mountain West. So it's not like Michigan played some scrub team. Last year, Michigan scored, I think, 30 or 31 points against East Carolina. I mean, obviously, I know you're talking about J.J. McCarthy compared to Davis Warren, but it's not like I don't think Michigan fans should have expected some huge blowout. I predicted 31-10. I was pretty close there. So
you were.
Obviously, were there concerns? Absolutely. The offensive line did not look like the offensive line we were expecting. Dominique Gadice, he was on his back several times in the game at center. They brought Greg Crippen in for a little bit. Apparently that was planned. Brought back in Gadice. The running game kind of goes with the offensive line. That was a big concern. Donovan Edwards did not look very good. He had 27 yards on 11 carries. Kalel Mullings, though, while he didn't look that good in the first half, he really stepped up in the second half and led the charge there. And then sticking with the offense, Colston Loveland, I thought he was absolutely phenomenal. You can tell that him and Davis Warren have a very, very good connection. And after the game, Davis Warren kind of talked about that a little bit. Shifting over to the defense, I think the best word to describe them is aggressive. I think under Wink Martindale that they're going to blitz a ton. And I think they're just going to be fast and physical. And I think that the defense will and should keep Michigan in most of the games this year.
Let me ask you about this. Penny Neer from the Facebook page. Penny, it's always great to see you. Actually, I purchased one of the books that she wrote, which is pretty good. Penny, she says Will Johnson was lackluster until the pick six. The criticism of Davis Warren was one thing, and the obvious criticism of Donovan Edwards, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I was surprised to see how many people were sort of talking about Will Johnson as if he's not the top cornerback in college football. But we did see some instances where, he did get burned on some pretty good routes. Credits to the wide receivers. But in the first quarter, I mean, he was like a half step short on a couple of interceptions. He was around the ball often, and then obviously sealed the win with the pick six. I mean, quick synopsis on what you saw from Will Johnson. Are you concerned that maybe Will Johnson is extremely overrated and this guy is a first round draft pick? Is that really what we're talking about after week one?
Hey, if that means Will Johnson comes back for a senior year, I think most fans would take it, right?
You know what? I think we need another year out of Will Johnson. I agree. We should start that campaign. He's not as good as we thought, folks.
No, I think for Will Johnson specifically, you kind of have that week one rust. I think that he was overly aggressive trying to get to the ball a couple times. According to PFF, he allowed 5 or 6 catches though, which is very not like Will Johnson, but obviously he made up for it. He had the 86-yard interception return for a touchdown, and that sealed the game when Fresno State had a chance to go down and really make it a ball game again.
Yeah, I agree. I just some of the criticism I saw from Will Johnson. I mean, somebody asked me that on the Facebook page, like, what's the level of concern there? And I think if I were to list out every single player on this football team, Will Johnson would be at the bottom. Hell, he wouldn't even be on the list of things that I'm concerned about. He's going to be fine. He's going to settle in. He is a early first round draft pick projection for a reason. And I think that, first game, first week rust, you knock that off a little bit. You got a big opponent coming to town. He's going to be locked in for Texas. So I am not concerned at all about Will Johnson. Matt Kirby brings up a good point here. He says field goal kicker Zavada was the MVP. Kid's got a big leg and he put some points on the board in Michigan. Without what Zavada was providing, the score looks a lot closer. That was our first look at him in action. We saw him in the press conference after. This is no knock on him whatsoever. I actually think it's a great quality. I looked over at Trent and I'm like, he looks like a kid. The guy looks like he's about 15 years old. But obviously very, very mature leg. The guy can drill it from about 55, 60 yards. He's pretty confident about. Trent, quick thoughts.
He said his long kick was 65 in a camp. Yeah. He said that his baseline is a 35-yard line, so a 53-yard kick. But no, Michigan fans are used to having good field goal kickers. You had Jake Moody for a few years. James Turner was clutch last year. And now you got Dominic Zavada, who can be around for 2 years. So I think Michigan's in great hands with its kicker. You really couldn't ask for a better performance from Zavada.
Yeah, I mean, he put 12 points on the board, right? 12 of the 30 points. You got the 3 extra points and then the 3 field goals, and Michigan certainly needed every single one of those points. You would like to see the Wolverines end drives in the end zone, but in the event where something stalls out, and I mean, if you can get this guy within 55 yards and you can get yourself 3 out of it, I mean, that certainly is a nice luxury. And Trent, to your point, Michigan has had a pretty solid stretch here of really good field goal kickers, and it looks like Zavada is going to be that guy. And so, yeah, it's a luxury to have. And when you don't have a guy like that, somebody who's inconsistent and a little bit unreliable, that can be a really big problem. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the issue with Zavada. I mean, dude, his first game underneath the lights coming from Arkansas State, he was in front of 110,000 plus under the lights in prime time, and he was money every single time in a relatively close game. So I'm
Chris,
pretty
did
happy.
you see how he got comfortable playing in the big house? I put an article out on it. I don't know if you read it or not.
No, are you talking about like his pregame ritual?
So he said that he wanted to figure out what it would be like to kick in the big house. So he got the new EA Sports College Football 25 game.
Perfect.
And he went into practice mode as himself, and he just would kick and kick and kick and kick and kick just to visualize what it would be like to kick in the big house. And then he was like, hey, it worked. So it was
just
pretty good.
Incredible. I mean, we're all utilizing that game for different reasons. I mean, Trent, you spend half of your afternoon, as a head coach in college football 25. So, I mean, that's whatever he's doing is clearly working. The guy was money. Do we call him Money Zavada? That really doesn't, Money Moody work. That really doesn't work. Whatever. We'll come up with a nickname for him. But again, solid evening for Michigan's kicker here. We got Miles from the Facebook page. He says Jordan Marshall needs some carries. I will say this about Jordan Marshall. Again, down on the sideline, taking photos, watched him through warmups. Jordan Marshall in a football uniform is much, much bigger than I thought he was or that I gave him credit for. He looks ready for D1 football now. He doesn't look like a development guy. Now, that being said, I'm not so sure how much more we're going to see of him moving forward. Obviously, the expectations are high. He's drawn some comparisons to a guy like Blake Corum, which we know how that turned out at Michigan. But I do think there's another guy, and we heard this in the press conference today, right? Tony Alford talking about he failed as a coach by not getting this running back in. Benjamin Hall is the guy that it sounds like Michigan is going to make an emphasis on making sure they get number 28 in the game. We did see... This might be a good lead into the running back discussion, which we're obviously going to have here tonight. Let's start with Benjamin Hall because Alfred brought him up specifically. Were you surprised we didn't see Ben Hall in there getting a couple reps? Were you surprised that it was strictly 2 guys between Donovan Edwards and Khalil Mullings?
I was. I mean, go back to the 2020 season for Michigan, the one that nobody wants to remember, but we would see 3, sometimes 4 running backs every single game, and it continued in 21, 22 last season. So to see Michigan stick with 2 guys was kind of shocking. I mean, even if you're talking about 2 or 3 carries, it was shocking. I mean, Ben Hall's been kind of a player that coaches have been talking up since last season. He looked fantastic last year as a true freshman in the spring game. He's like a bowling ball running down the field. And Tony Alford said today when he's running north and south, the dude's almost impossible to bring down. So he definitely said he wants to get him into the game this week.
Yeah, I mean, he's a load. I mean, the guy's lower body, you can see that he's got the strength he needs. We talked about that going into the season. That was one of the position groups where Michigan was incredibly deep, and you expected to see quite a bit of rotation there. And I'm not sure how much of that was the result of Michigan not having much success in the running game, at least through the first 3 quarters. They caught a little bit of a rhythm in the fourth quarter, but for the first 3 quarters, it was pretty slow going. And, Donovan Edwards took a lot of heat because of that. I went back and watched the game twice. Were there some errors that he made? Maybe, sure. Could he have done something different? Could he have been a little more patient in certain instances? Sure. I mean, there's always things you can improve on. But more often than not, when he got the ball in his hands, there was just nowhere to go. There was somebody on him all the time. And I think that offensive line, for as good as we think they can be and for as experienced as they are, you're not going to lose your entire starting offensive line from a national championship winning team, reload, and then just see no issues in week 1. you said it, Trent, at the center position, they were rotating guys out and some guys were getting pushed around. We saw Gio miss a block that led to a sack on Davis Warren. Evan Link, he got beat on the edge on the interception that Davis Warren threw to Frederick Moore. Now, I'm not saying that's why Davis Warren threw that interception, but there's just little things that you could see here and there where it's going to take some games for this offensive line to find their rhythm. Obviously, with Texas coming to town week 2, they're going to have to find it quickly. But I don't know. Let me ask you that question. Like, how much of what you saw from Donovan Edwards do you think is a Donovan Edwards issue? Or do you think it's more of like, it starts up front and the offensive line really wasn't getting the push they needed, really weren't creating the blocks they needed to? I mean, hell, we even saw Max Bredesen whiff on a couple of blocks. Like, do you think that was more the issue, or did you share the concern that a lot of people seem to share that Donovan Edwards is struggling for whatever reason?
I mean, I think it's both. I think obviously your offensive line, that's where it starts at. You have to open up holes for the running backs. But even by the second half, like I said earlier, Khalil Mullings really stepped up. I think he finished with 92 yards. He was running. He was getting 5-6 yards a carry at that point in time. Donovan Edwards, he's still getting his 1, 2, maybe 3 yards per carry. I mean, there's something there. And we've seen that all of last season with Edwards. When you go back and you look at his game logs, you're talking 20, 30, maybe 40 yards. And then he had that breakout game against Washington with those 2 long runs. I mean, there's just been something with him since last season that it's like he either can't find the right hole or he just can't keep his legs churning along. Like Blake Corum, that's what made him so special. Yeah. He refused to go down, and that's kind of like how I feel about Khalil Mullings right now. Kind of similar attitude in that aspect of he refuses to go down. He's going to keep those legs turning, and obviously we know what Donovan Edwards is capable of. But I think that we need to see, and I think he really needs to see it to continue to build his confidence that he can be the starting running back in Michigan.
There's no question about it. CJ Frazier from the Facebook page says they can't call the same running plays for Dono as they do for Mullings. You got to get Dono outside. I mean, one way or another, you got to get Donovan Edwards in space. That's where he operates the best. Even if you try to put him out into the slot or something like that, get him the ball in space. But Trent, I agree with you. I mean, to me, that was the biggest difference. Again, it starts with the offensive line, because as soon as Donovan Edwards was getting the ball, there were guys that were already surrounding him, and it was tough to sort of make a decision one way or the other. I didn't see any gaping holes in the offensive line that he could shoot through on his way to 60, which I predicted, by the way. I was wrong on like 4 or 5 of my predictions. We won't go back into that. But the difference is, Khalil Mullings, it's the yards after contact. Like, he really wasn't seeing a big hole in front of him either. Like, the difference was he was dragging 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 guys and bouncing off tackles and finding ways to get yards after contact, particularly there in the fourth quarter. I think it was when Warren threw the touchdown pass to Colson Loveland there late. Like, Khalil Mullings was finding his groove. The offensive line seemed to be finding their groove. Like, it took them about 3.5 quarters to really get things running. So I don't know, man. Yes, these are some of the things that we saw with Donovan Edwards last year. And it does seem like it's a bit of a struggle right now to get through the initial contact. And when you look at a guy like Khalil Mullings facing the same situation, he just seems to have a habit of making more out of it. But I do think, yes, you said this, Trent, it's incredibly important for him to have a breakthrough game, to see, just remind himself of who he is and what he's capable of, because certainly, I mean, dude, he had like 6 yards on 6 carries with like 5 minutes left in the third quarter or something like that. Like that just cannot happen. Even with an offensive line struggling, that can't happen at the University of Michigan. Your star running back, your feature running back, to have 6 yards on 6 carries, particularly with a guy like Donovan Edwards. So they have to get that fixed. But that was another thing I saw on social media. A lot of, arrows directed toward Donovan Edwards, when really, when you go back and watch the tape, it's like there's a number of things that happened there that I think could have made that a better situation. Let's keep going through. Bobby from the Facebook page, he says, Warren throws a nice ball. He will connect more as the season goes on. Trent, Davis Warren, for as much criticism as Donovan Edwards was receiving on social media, Davis Warren, even from a lot of people within the Michigan fan base, he was taking a little bit of a beating on social media after the game. I was down on the field and I heard throughout the game, and I think, Trent, you probably even heard this, there were actively chants for Alex Orji throughout the evening, people clamoring for Orji to be in the game. I don't know if you went back and watched it afterwards, but we talked about this on Monday. What is your assessment, generally speaking, of what you saw from Davis Warren on Saturday? And are you as concerned as some people seem to be?
I mean, once again, I feel like it was kind of as expected. You're talking about a guy making his first career start. It's in prime time. Everyone's watching you. I think that he handled the situation pretty well for the most part. I think he's very good with the short to intermediate routes. Yep. Obviously he threw a couple deep balls. I mean, he had Fred Moore open. If he would have led Fred Moore, it's a touchdown. He just didn't put enough air under it. The one he threw to Tyler Morris on the right side of the field, I mean, I think that was where he needed to put it. Tyler Morris just didn't judge the ball properly, and he could have came down with it. My only kind of concern I had with Davis Warren is I felt like he locked onto one guy way too often and didn't go through his progressions the way he should have. I mean, there was definitely a few times that he locked in on either Colston Loveland or he threw a couple passes to Donovan Edwards where he had an open Tyler Morris 15 yards down the field that he could have threw it to. But I think that will get better as well when he gets more game reps. Unfortunately, your next game is Texas, so that stuff's got to get worked out right away.
Yeah, and I think you make good points, and those are all points that I made. I mean, I went back and watched the game a couple of times, and I'm not some sort of film study guy. I'm not breaking down the tape. Just I wanted to see the way he operated and the way he played the game. It's really hard to get a sense of that from field level, especially when you're looking through a viewfinder. But what I came away with, like after the game, I was concerned about Davis Warren and whether or not he was the guy. And obviously I could hear the chants in the stands, and it just seemed like the offense was trying to run through mud and nothing was happening. But when I went back and watched it, I was actually pleasantly surprised at how good of a ball he throws, to Bobby's point. Like, he does throw a nice ball. He obviously hit Colston Loveland, which we'll get into Colston Loveland in a little bit, I'm sure, but hit Colston Loveland a number of times. Good throw to Tyler Morris. The deep pass down to Tyler Morris on the sideline. Yeah, Tyler Morris slowed up a little bit. I think he might have lost the ball in the lights. I'm not sure what happened there, but Davis Warren put that ball where it needed to be. The interception to Frederick Moore, that was just a bad ball. And Davis Warren did throw a couple of bad balls. There was one he threw to Donovan Edwards that wasn't great. There was one that he threw to Kendrick Bell that was kind of out of reach. But again, you had Kendrick Bell with a drop. You had Colston Loveland, who had a phenomenal game, with a drop. You had Tyler Morris slow up on a route. I mean, there were certain things that were happening that, yes, did he seem to lock on his primary target, his initial target? Yes, but when the offensive line is struggling and things are happening quickly, and this is your first start, former walk-on guy. I mean, this is live reps now. NBC's in the building. Like, it's going to take a minute for you to just find your rhythm. And when you take all of those things into account, I think he did exactly what he needed to do, which is play relatively safe, play within the system, look for number 18 out there, because if you get it within the vicinity, he's going to catch it. And Davis Warren did those things. And so after I watched it a couple of times, like, are there improvements to be made? Yes, absolutely. But, he hit Tyler Morris on a great ball. He hit Kendrick Bell on a great ball. Samaj Morgan across the middle he hit. And then Colston Loveland, a lot of chemistry there. So I think overall, if the offensive line can keep the pocket clean and Davis Warren isn't asked to be a superhero with his arm, it's very much, to me, reminiscent of what we saw from Cade McNamara 2021 and what would be expected of him. I mean, we talked about that at length going into the season, that we know Davis Warren isn't J.J. McCarthy, and we don't expect him to be J.J. McCarthy. But keep in mind, those same concerns that we heard about Davis Warren after week 1, we heard those about J.J. McCarthy after he won the job. Doesn't go through his progressions, too risky with the ball, locking in on a target, whatever it is. Like, we heard those concerns about J.J. McCarthy, heard him after the Illinois game where it was a tight one with Michigan. They had to win it out of last-second field goal. Heard it after TCU where J.J. turned the ball over a couple times. Certainly heard it after the Bowling Green game last year when he threw 3 interceptions. So I just think it was an overreaction on Davis Warren because people wanted it to be more prolific than what it was. To me, it was a safe performance. Yeah, he locked in on some of his targets, but 15 of 25, and you've got a few drops in there. You got Gio missing a block that leads to a sack. You got Donovan Edwards missing a block that forced Warren to have to throw the ball early before the play developed. Like, you flip some of those things around, and now all of a sudden 15 of 25 is 18 or 19 of 25 or 26 or whatever it is. And it looks a lot better, and you don't have drives stall out. Instead of punting or settling for 3, now you're driving toward the end zone. And so I walked away thinking like it was a very narrow margin between what it was and what it could have been. And it could have been a really stellar performance from him week 1. Do you think that's a fair assessment, or are you still, I guess, let me ask you this. We had a lot of speculation before we went into the game. Now you've seen Davis Warren play. Is it at where you thought it would be, below where you thought it would be, or do you walk away thinking that was a little bit better than what I thought it would be?
No, I mean, I wasn't like super overly impressed with Davis Warren, but I didn't think he was bad by any means. He's exactly kind of what I thought he was going to be. He's the definition of a game manager. I don't think he's going to go out there and throw for 350 yards and 4 scores and lead you to victory. I think you're going to have to rely on your defense. You're going to have to rely on your rushing attack, and he's going to be fairly safe. I don't think he's going to throw many interceptions. While he's already thrown 1, I don't think it's going to be something that Davis Warren's going to do. I really don't think Kurt Campbell is going to allow him to with the play calling. I think if game 1 shows us anything, there's going to be a lot of those 5-6 yard passes that are relatively safe. Maybe as the season progresses, Davis Warren gets a little more confidence, we might see that open up a little bit more. But after week 1, I think Davis Warren's kind of right exactly where I thought he would be at.
Yeah, 100% agree. And Steve from the Facebook page, yes, 100%. All of these issues were brought up last year after the Bowling Green game, which just happened to be a year that Michigan went undefeated and then went on to win a national championship. And so, yeah, I'm not sure what people were expecting to see, but again, when you sit back and you watch it or you rewatch it and you kind of take some time to digest it and look at where he was throwing the ball and where, the ball placement I thought was pretty damn good. Obviously leaning on a guy like Colston Loveland, that's good decision making. I thought he made a lot of good decisions throughout the evening. Every ball was not a perfect ball, and he's got things to work on, but when he's got a clean pocket and he's got time to throw, the mechanics are good, he puts the ball where it needs to be, and that's really all you got to ask for from a guy like Davis Warren. And so I walk away feeling, I'll say this, and we talked about this on Monday. I'm not sure if we've talked about it on the show, but neither one of us were slotting Davis Warren to be the starting quarterback going into this season. And so if somebody told me that was going to be the case, I probably would have been a little more concerned. But after watching it, I feel a little more optimistic. I thought in many instances he was pretty sharp. He made the right decision, got the ball where it needed to be, played within the system, made the safe throw, did the things he was supposed to do. Solid week 1 performance, but obviously it's going to have to get better week 2 against Texas.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything that they struggled with this week, you've got to correct it. You've got to get it ready to go for a huge showdown.
No doubt. Penny Neer, once again from the Facebook page, she says Khalil Mullings was a beast. We talked about Donovan Edwards quite a bit and sort of trying to figure out what happened there. Got to give Khalil Mullings his flowers, man. This is a guy who, started off on the other side of the ball. He's a veteran now. I'm not sure. Is he a graduate student or a true senior at this point? I'm not exactly sure which one.
Grad. I'm pretty sure he's a graduate.
But veteran in the system, obviously, and I was extremely impressed with the way that he ran the ball Saturday night. We talked about it earlier in the show. Just the way that he keeps churning his legs and the way that he can keep moving after contact and drive guys along with him. Like, that's what Michigan football has been built upon. That's what makes this offense go. And when that started to work and when the offensive line was starting to find a rhythm, that was the only offensive drive in the game where Michigan started off, on the other end of the field and then ended it in the end zone. The only other offensive touchdown during the game came on a turnover, and it was from 3 yards out or 5 yards out on a short pass from Alex Orji to Donovan Edwards. And so really Michigan only had one solid offensive drive all evening, and Khalil Mullings was certainly a big part of that, man. I don't know if there's going to be a true RB1, RB2 hierarchy in this offense, but dude, Khalil Mullings, he is going to be a major, major factor in Michigan's offense moving forward. I mean, do you think that there's a chance where maybe he asserts himself as the feature back here in the near future?
I think we talked, I think it was last week, about how Donovan Edwards was clearly the alpha on the running back depth chart, and that Michigan was going to need him to run for 70 yards a game or whatever the number was. And there was a lot of pushback. A lot of people were saying, no, Khalil Mullings is going to surpass Donovan Edwards. And I'll tell you what, after week one, those people, that narrative is not going to change because Khalil Mullings completely outplayed Donovan Edwards. And if it happens again in week two, I think you might see a shift a little bit. I think you might start seeing Khalil Mullings get that 20 carries a game, where you might see Dono. Hell, they might even use Dono more in like the slot, put him out wide, play him more as a receiver while you have Khalil Mullings in the backfield, play Benjamin Hall in the backfield, and just keep using Donovan Edwards in different ways to get him the ball.
I 100% agree, man. Like I don't see any scenario where you can't try to utilize Donovan Edwards and his athleticism somehow, whether it is in the slot, in the passing game. Hell, we know he can throw the ball. Put him in the kick return. Get him out in open space, whatever you got to do. But yeah, man, I mean, everything is a results business, and Khalil Mullings was finding a way to get the results. And I think that for as much as we love Donovan Edwards and we think he is capable of doing so many great things as a running back, and again, this is week one. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to judge everything on week one, but I also think that you got to give a guy like Khalil Mullings his flowers. Like the dude played well, hard runner, like just everything about him to me represents what Michigan football is all about. And so I'm excited for him, man, to get his opportunity. And yeah, I mean, against a team like Texas, like Michigan is going to have to control the ball. You're going to have to convert on third down, and you're going to have to keep that Texas offense on the sideline. And in order to do that, the offensive line and the running game is going to have to work. And I think Khalil Mullings is going to play a big part of that on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. I'm guessing you're going to see him get the 15 carries, if not more, again on Saturday.
Would you take the over or under on 15.5 carries for Khalil Mullings on Saturday?
I think Michigan's going to want to control the clock, which means a lot of runs. So I would take the over.
Take the over.
Yeah.
All right. Donovan Edwards over under 15.5 carries.
I'm going to go under.
Under. All right. So, I mean, more of the same from what we saw from week one. And then obviously a little bit of sprinkling of Benjamin Hall in there. Who knows? Maybe we might get some Jordan Marshall. I saw somebody ask about Cole Cabana. What's the deal with him? I don't know. I mean,
did you see him? I didn't even see him warming up on Saturday. I was looking at the running backs, and it went Donovan Edwards, Khalil Mullings, Ben Hall, Jordan Marshall. And then it was Dunlap and Leon Franklin back there. I didn't even see Cole Cabana at all on the field.
I didn't either, but I wasn't looking all that closely, to be perfectly. I mean, you've got the bird's eye view from up there, so I'll take your word for it. But yeah, I mean, you got Ricky from the Facebook page asking whatever happened to him. I mean, as far as I know, he's still there and he's still a tremendous athlete. I do know that he was dealing with some nagging injuries. I don't know if those things have lingered into the season or if he's good to go. But certainly on Saturday, you're going to see 3 running backs. It's going to be Donovan Edwards, Khalil Mullings, Benjamin Hall. We might even see him go a little bit deeper, just depending, again, how successful is the offensive line. You're not going to keep sending random guys in to just hammer it at a brick wall. Like, you're going to have to find some running lanes there and some guys that can take advantage of it. But I do agree with you, Trent. I just have this gut feeling that we're going to see more Khalil Mullings on Saturday, and I don't necessarily know that that's a bad thing.
I think when you need those tough yards on the ground, I mean, from what we've seen, Khalil Mullings is going to be that guy that can grind to get them.
Yeah, and here's the other thing that I noticed about Khalil Mullings, which, by the way, utilizing him in special teams, we've always sort of talked about Khalil Mullings as a short yardage back, a wrecking ball, a guy who can get the yards. This guy is quick on his feet. He's got the shake and the shimmy, and he can juke and he can make the moves. And so he is far more of a complete running back than I gave him credit for heading into the season. And I think that, look no further than the fact that he is returning kicks and he's out there making plays on special teams. So Khalil Mullings is a weapon for the Michigan offense as well. Scott from the Facebook page, I don't agree with this. I think that is a very strong take. He says bench Donovan Edwards, Khalil Mullings number 1, Ben Hall number 2 on the depth chart. I think that's a little bit strong after week 1. If we get, if we get 4 weeks into the season, right, and we see Donovan Edwards averaging 1.5 yards, 2 yards per carry, and other guys are finding more success, then maybe I think it's time to visit that and see what the issue is. But back to what Trent and I were saying before, like, you don't ever take a guy like Donovan Edwards out of the equation. He hasn't lost his ability to be explosive. I think that's on the coaching staff to figure out how do we utilize this guy offensively and figure out how to put him in the best situation to be successful. So
yeah, Donovan Edwards he's an elite talent. You got to have him on the field some capacity, whether that is maybe you do shift him out from running back occasionally and you put him in the slot, but you have to play him. You got to keep him on the field. I mean, he is a home run threat just waiting to happen.
I mean, it was Ron Bellamy who forced him to switch from wide receiver to running back, I think in high school, right? Like that was how the story goes. Like Donovan Edwards was a wide receiver. And I think he was like, he was hesitant to want to make that switch. He wanted to be a wide receiver, but Ron Bellamy saw him, at their days at West Bloomfield, saw him like, hey, you are a running back. And obviously that's paid off pretty well for him. But again, Dono is a elite athlete. You've just got to put him in the right situation to help him be successful. And I trust that the staff is going to do that moving forward, regardless of what that looks like. Jonathan from the Facebook page, he asks, any concerns with play calling being pass heavy? Seemed like it was a pass heavy game up until that last drive, maybe trying to give the O-line more time to gel. Trent, I'll ask you, any concerns with maybe too much passing on Saturday night?
I didn't feel like there was too much passing. I thought that they had to pass because they were in either long second down or long third down, and they were trying to convert it. I felt like they were trying to run the ball, especially early, but Donovan Edwards couldn't get anything going. The offensive line wasn't blocking very well. Kalel Mullings first half couldn't get anything going, where it just kind of, you had to use Davis Warren for those short passes to get the offense to get any chance of a first down. I felt like Davis Warren had to throw the ball 4 or 5 yards because the run game wasn't working.
Yeah, 100% accurate. That was how I took it as well. Like normally it's the other way around, right? You're using the running game to open up opportunities in the passing game. And I think Michigan was trying to do that, but they weren't having any success through the first 3 quarters. And so they had to lean on Davis Warren to try to move the ball, utilize those short to intermediate throws to Colston Loveland, move the chains, and then try to get back to hammering it away with the offensive line. And yeah, to your point, Jonathan, like it seemed like it was pass heavy up until that last drive. And that's because on that last offensive drive that they had, they were starting to find success in moving the ball on the ground. And that's where Michigan really wants to be. And so I think that needs to be taken into account as well. Like you go into that game as, Davis Warren, former walk-on, first start at Michigan Stadium, and you're thinking you're going to be able to rely on the running game. And all of a sudden it's like, that's not happening right now. What turns out we need you, Davis Warren, to move the sticks for us through the air. Not that he wasn't prepared for it, but it's just, we all know that that's not the way that Michigan chooses to operate. And that was the situation that they were forced into. So I don't really have any concerns about it being too pass heavy. To me, it says what we already know about Sharon Moore, which is pretty much by any means necessary. If we got to move the ball through the air, then that's what we're going to do. If we can do it on the ground, then that's what we're going to do. They're not really committed to doing one specific thing all the time, but we know what the preference is in Michigan, right? It's smash mouth football, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, pass it when you need to sort of deal. So hopefully we're going to see a flip back to that. I'll ask you this. Let's just say we see 25 more attempts from Davis Warren on Saturday. Does 25 attempts make you feel good, or does that give you some concern about what's happening on the ground? Like, how would you feel about 25 attempts Saturday against Texas?
I think that either tells me that the run game is not working again for the second straight game, that the offensive line's not opening the holes, or that Michigan somehow got off to a terrible start. Texas has a big lead and they have to use the passing game to catch back up. Because I think, especially in a game like this, they're going to want to really pound the rock. They're going to want to control the tempo, control the clock, keep Quinn Ewers on the sideline. And I think running the ball is going to be what they want to do going into it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that, again, that's just what Michigan wants to do. Pound the rock, pound the rock, pound the rock. Loosen them up a little bit, sling it to Davis Warren, utilize Colston Loveland. The Michigan wide receivers, like that's another thing that we really haven't talked about. But outside of Colston Loveland, there really wasn't much there. Kendrick Bell is a guy that I was pretty high on going into the spring. We saw him make the big play in the spring game. And we saw him out there getting a decent amount of reps, and he made some plays. And so, again, Ronnie Bell's little brother. I think there is a bright future for Kendrick Bell as a wide receiver, but gonna need better play out of Davis Warren to find him. Certainly going to need better play out of the wide receivers to get separation. Travis from the Facebook page, he says, put Warren in the gun with Orgy and Dono on his sides and let's ride.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it would be. I'm not sure that we're going to see that, but we've talked about Davis Warren. We've talked about the running backs. I'm a little bit surprised we're almost 40 minutes into the show. We have not talked Alex Orgy yet at this point. So Thank you, Travis, for the question, because let's talk about that a little bit. Alex Orgy, we saw 2 pass attempts. He was 1 of 2, threw a touchdown. The other passing attempt was no bueno. The first question, are you surprised by how Michigan utilized Alex Orgy on Saturday night?
I want to say yes, but at the end of the day, I'm not. Because we've become accustomed to seeing how Michigan uses Alex Orgy. When he comes in, he runs the football. He comes in, he runs the football. The dude had 1 career passing attempt entering the season. But then the very first time he comes in, they fake it. It's a pass, touchdown. So it's like, all right.
I got to be honest. When that happened, I was like, oh shit, it's Orgy time. And I thought it was just the Orgy from there on out. I was really surprised to see them go. Again, he didn't make an incredible throw. It was a pretty short throw to a wide open Donovan Edwards. But as soon as that happened, I thought things were going to go a certain way. But it's clear that it wasn't just sort of I don't think it was a razor thin competition. I think Davis Warren legitimately won it, and clearly they would plan on sticking with him. But I mean, we're again, Alex Orgy, 2 passing attempts on Saturday. That I was pretty surprised about. I was blown away. I thought we were going to see more reps from Orgy, but it's clear Davis Warren is the guy, right? Do you think that was sort of a bait and switch week 1, and we're going to see something different week 2? Sharon Moore said, we're going to try to utilize Alex Orgy more, or do you just think this is the way it's going to be?
No, I mean, I think that they're probably going to try to utilize him more. With that being said, I think that means he's going to be running the football more. I mean, we saw that second pass attempt. I mean, it was bad. But
okay. So is it fair though? We talk about, Davis Warren being able to get into a rhythm. Here's Alex Orgy. You bring him in, you have him throw it once. I think he was only on the field for back-to-back plays once. Is it fair to ask a guy to come in and make a play when you're playing so infrequently? Alex Orgy doesn't have the opportunity to get into a rhythm with his arm at all. You're asking him to come in, run the ball 99% of the time, and then, we need you to throw it. And it's not like that was a complicated throw that he missed on, but I do think there's something to be said for letting a guy get into a rhythm, let him just get used to that motion in the game. Do you think that was partially, I don't know if it's fair to say partially to blame for that bad throw, but I mean, do you think there's something to it that a guy just needs to be able to sling the ball a few times to find that groove and find that rhythm?
I think it's very fair. Going back to the spring game, he started off kind of shaky. By the middle of it to the end, he was moving the sticks. He was making good throws. I mean, I thought he played from start to finish. I thought Alex Orgy commanded the offense and he looked pretty good throwing the football. Obviously, going to week 1, he was 1 for 2, and his second pass attempt was absolutely terrible. But no, I mean, we're talking about a guy who has all this pressure on his shoulders. He knows what people say about him. He can't throw the football. So it's a guy going out there, and every time he throws the ball, he's probably thinking, or could be thinking, I've got to connect this. I've got to throw a perfect pass. And obviously, he's a competitor. He wants to be playing. He knows if he goes out there and threads the needle and makes good passes, there's an opportunity for him to get more than 9 snaps a game that he had in week 1. So there's probably a lot going on upstairs in his mind that could make a simple throw like we saw look so bad.
Yeah, I mean, overthinking it. And I think you make a good point. The opportunities are so few and far in between that you got to be perfect on every single one of them, So yeah, I mean, on one hand, I was glad that Davis Warren got as many opportunities as he got because I thought he looked relatively good. And I thought, like I said before, I think he made a lot of good plays, a lot of smart plays, played within the system, played it safe. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit disappointed that Alex Orji just didn't get more of an opportunity to move the ball. Game was a little bit closer than they thought. Offensive line wasn't doing as well as they thought. So maybe some of the things they planned to do offensively, they weren't able to do. I'm sure they would have liked to have rotated more running backs in if things had turned out different. Like if it was, I don't know, 52-3 early in the, late in the third or early in the fourth, you probably see Benjamin Hall out there. Hell, maybe you see Jordan Marshall out there. Maybe you do see Alex Orji throwing the ball a little bit more. But I think just given the way that everything was playing out, they sort of had to tighten things up and stay within their lane. But yeah, I don't know, man. I just Alex Orji clearly is a running threat. Everybody knows what's going to happen when he comes into the game, and he still finds a way to move the chains. I mean, he was, dude, on the read option, like, that there's no read. He's not giving the ball, but he was still fooling the Fresno State defense a couple of times there. Just really good at that. And I don't know what it is, but I just would like to see him have more opportunities to throw the ball, particularly if you lose a guy like Davis Warren. Davis Warren turns an ankle. Some sort of shoulder issue, whatever it is. We already know that Jack Tuttle's dealing with something. Like, let this guy find some sort of rhythm or sling the ball. But I guess the game has to really dictate that, right? It has to be the right situation to allow him to do that. We talked about this on Monday before we move away from the quarterbacks. Do you think that based on what we saw on Monday, do you think maybe it was a little bit misleading during fall camp as to how close, we were told the quarterback battle really was between Warren and Alex Orji? Do you think it was really that close, or do you think what we saw on Saturday was indicative that, hey, I don't think that this thing was ever really that close? It was pretty clearly Davis Warren early on.
I think it was probably closer than what most people now believe. Go back to the spring game. Watch Alex Orji throw the football. I know there were some people that weren't impressed with him, but he wasn't that bad. I mean, I would argue that he was right on par with Davis Warren. And with his dual threat ability, if the dude can throw the football with his dual threat ability, you're talking about a huge element to this Michigan offense. And I'm sure that's in the back of Sherrone Moore's mind when he's trying to make this decision of who's going to start. So no, I think it was probably a close quarterback competition, but I also believe Davis Warren probably came on strong and won the job fairly.
Yeah, 100%. So as far as Alex Orji goes, I don't know really what to expect from him moving forward. Again, Sherrone Moore says they're going to try to incorporate him more, but I mean, Trent, I'm with you. I think that just means utilizing him in the running game more. But if you are the opposing defense and Alex Orji is in, you're thinking one thing and all of a sudden another thing happens, like, could be pretty good for the Michigan offense. So it is going to be really interesting to see how they utilize him moving forward. Is it primarily as a rusher, or are they going to let him open it up a little bit? Does he got something there with his arm that maybe we're just not all privy to, and we would like to see it work? We'll find out certainly against Texas. Ron Thomas from the Facebook page says, never bench the Don, the most versatile back in the country. I agree, but you got to produce, and part of that's on him. Part of it's on the offensive line. It's all, it all has to work together. It's certainly not all on Donovan Edwards. Brian Petrosky from the Facebook page. And by the way, I'm at 616 on the questions. It's 650. So I'm trying to get through these as much as I can. Brian Petrosky from the Facebook page. I mean, we gave Khalil Mullings his flowers. Talk about needing to give a guy flowers. Colston Loveland, this guy, absolutely incredible. Line him up at tight end, line him up in the slot. Dude, he was on Fresno State's best cornerback and he burned him. Like an absolute mismatch nightmare. Will he be the first 1,000 yard receiver in a long time? I'll ask you, Trent, where do you think this is headed with Colston Loveland? Because after week one, if he can stay healthy, this guy, I just don't know that there's anything he can't do.
Yeah, when I did my early season predictions, I predicted that Colston Loveland would be right around 1,000 yards. I didn't know that he would go over it, but it wouldn't shock me whatsoever. I think that, first off, he's a matchup nightmare. He's too fast for a linebacker, and he's too big and tall for your cornerback or safety. So that bodes so well for him. Secondly, it's pretty clear that Davis Warren, he wants to get him the ball. So unless they double, triple team Colston Loveland, which is going to open up more opportunities for your receivers, yeah, it's very possible that Colston Loveland could reach 1,000 yards this year.
Yeah, I mean, catch radius is just incredible. Put the ball anywhere in his vicinity, and he's going to get it. I just think he is such a supremely talented athlete, and we all sort of knew that about him. I mean, he's being projected as a first-round draft pick. We saw what he was capable of last year, and I do think in this offense, and particularly with a guy like Davis Warren, like, we talk about how, like, oh, well, he locked on Colston Loveland. Like, if I'm out there looking at what my options are, I'm locking on number 18 too. Like, just get to a spot and I'm going to get it to him. So I don't fault him too much for that. But this was brought up in the press conference on Monday. Texas also sat back and they're watching game film and they know that Davis Warren, that's the safety net, right? Go to number 18. Do you have, for as much as we were impressed by what he did and what the outcome was and what he's capable of, how much of a concern do you have that if that's taken away, it's going to get pretty scary through the air offensively?
Not overly. I mean, I'm still high on Samaj Morgan. I'm still high on Tyler Morris. I will say, though, the receiver depth chart surprised me. Seeing Peyton O'Leary start, Frederick Moore, as hyped as he was.
Another guy who had a drop, by the way. I didn't mention that when we were talking about Davis Warren earlier, but I mean, there's 3 or 4 drops right there.
As high as the coaches were about Frederick Moore, he played 3 snaps. 3. He was on the field 3 times on Saturday night. And he was supposed to be your receiver 3 this year, is what everyone thought. But I think that they're okay with Colston Loveland, Tyler Morris, and Samaj Morgan as a trio. If we start talking about injuries, then I definitely think there could be some concern. Amorion Walker, he's not even on the field, doesn't play 1 snap. Charleston, he was only out there a couple times as well. So these guys that were getting rave reviews, we really didn't see them a whole lot. So I don't know exactly what that means. Are they just not ready, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, and Trent, this is something that you said. I mean, you said it earlier in the show, Tyrone from the Facebook page. He says people are downplaying Fresno State. That's a tough program. I mean, I don't know if we hit on it in the show, but Fresno State, with the expanded playoff, the 12-team playoff, and a group of 5 champion is going to get in. That Fresno State team, that could be a playoff team. I mean, that's a very realistic possibility. How much of that do you think is playing a factor in sort of the out of whack response we saw to a 30-10 victory? Because you would think that this game was much, much closer. But I mean, I guess, is it unfair to expect the vast majority of Michigan fans to be plugged into just how good Fresno State is? We're so accustomed to, well, the first 4 games are cupcakes. Fresno State, we don't know shit about them. That's going to be a cakewalk. Fresno State has a good team, solid quarterback play. They got athletes on both sides of the ball. How much of that do you think was a factor in what we saw on Saturday versus Michigan was just rusty and needed some time to develop?
No, I mean, I think that it's a huge part of it. Fresno State's a solid team. They returned 80% of their production offensively and like 70% defensively. So it's a veteran team. I think the general fan, thinks of the Big Ten, SEC, your Big 12. They don't think of your smaller conferences like the Mountain West. And I don't think a whole lot of people really even understand who Fresno State is. They've won 9 or more games in 3 straight years. Veteran team. They've got a great offense. I think this was a solid showing for Michigan from top to bottom. Obviously, there's things that need to be fixed, and they're obviously going to work on that too. But no, I think that playing Fresno State week 1 was not an easy game, and Michigan handled it.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money, man. I just think like I said before, man, we're so accustomed to the early season schedule just being an easy thing for Michigan. And, look, and I think Colston Loveland said this in his post-game interview, where there's a lot of talk about how Michigan's only returning 1 starter offensively, right? And it's Colston Loveland. But Max Bredesen has played a lot of ball. Donovan Edwards has played a lot of ball. There is a lot of experience on this offense. But even with that being said, I just think that, hell, dude, I think I predicted they were going to put 41 points on the board. And then, Donovan Edwards was going to have a 60-plus yard touchdown run in the game. Like, none of that happened. And I think that as we got into the game, yes, Fresno State was a tough opponent. I mean, they've got a solid team. They're well coached. But ultimately, I think we got to temper our expectations for where this Michigan offense is. it's clear that it's just going to take some. I mean, you didn't lose just average guys. You lost legends on the off. Zach Zinner, Trevor Keegan, JJ McCarthy, Blake Corum, Roman was. These are not slouches. Like, these guys were, each and every single one of these guys were critical to Michigan's success offensively, and you lost the vast majority of it. And so I think, to think we weren't going to see some sort of, I don't know if I want to call it a drop off, but some sort of like just a little bit of rust. It's going to take some time, right? You can only learn so much during fall camp. You got to go out and play live reps. Obviously, there's a hope that they're going to get better, but I do think it starts on the offensive line and starts up front. I'm trying to go through some of these as much as I possibly can. Ricky from the Facebook page, he says, did y'all hear that Harbaugh with his 6'5", 300-pound fullback for the Chargers? Yes, we did. We actually put out an article about it. I mean, very Jim Harbaugh being Jim Harbaugh out in L.A. I absolutely love it. I think he's 6'4", but 6'4", 300-pound running back. Yeah, I mean, that's, those are the types of things we became accustomed to in Michigan, right? Utilizing that fullback and smash mouth football, and he's obviously going to carry that into Los Angeles. Jared from the Facebook page, good to see you. He says, Chris, September 28th, military appreciation game, National Guard flyover. You know the move. I do know the move, Jared. Well, I mean, this is the first you're telling me about it. Yeah, we're going to have a discussion offline about that, which I think I say this a lot, but shout out to the Michigan Army National Guard. Like, just some of the most incredible experiences I've ever had, not just in sports and covering sports, but in my life. Never would have thought that any of those things would have happened, but being able to do some of the things with the National Guard I've done, being in a Black Hawk, the flyover for UNLV week 2 during a national championship season, just, things that you won't forget. So shout out to you, Jared. Appreciate you. Let's keep going through some of these questions. I don't want to skip too many. Trent, did you see anything that I may have missed? Once again, people are just extremely...
You're too far behind for me, man.
I am too far behind. Matt Kirby says once he started to pull it and run it himself, it looked better. I'm guessing that's what she said. That I'm guessing you're talking about Alex Orji there. But yeah, I mean, Alex Orji looks solid. He does what he does. I mean, we know that he's a solid runner. I would just like to see him be able to throw the ball a little bit more. Yeah. I think people are still on Alex Orji here. All Hail Michigan from the YouTube page says, I was more concerned about the amount of playing time he got or lack thereof. I'm guessing that's in relation to Alex Orji. Like, yeah, I just think everybody went into this thinking it was going to play out a certain way. I saw CJ in the comments say that he envisioned it being more of a 50-50 deal. And I think even when we learned that Davis Warren was the guy, I think everybody anticipated that we were going to see far more of Alex Orji in the passing game than what we saw. But once again, like, it became clear that, Davis Warren firmly inserted himself as the starting quarterback. And I think that Michigan is going to ride that for as long as they can. We heard it from Kurt Campbell during fall camp and even to a certain extent during the spring. When they made a decision, they wanted to stick with that guy. They didn't want to be in a situation where they were second guessing themselves. And so I think that that's what we're going to see from Davis Warren until he proves otherwise. But, is Alex Orji a solid second option? Can he come in and do what needs to be done through the air consistently? I guess, only time will tell. Keep going through. My goodness. Dude, just active. Darren May says that's what she said. All right, let's get to, as we're getting to 58 minutes here, talk Texas a little bit. Bobby from the Facebook page, he says, what are we thinking about the Michigan defense versus Quinn Ewers and that Texas offense? Obviously, they look pretty strong against Colorado State. It is Colorado State, but they did put up, 52 points on the board. Quinn Ewers, we know he's an elite quarterback. This is a matchup. This is going to be the defining matchup in this game. It's going to be Michigan's defense versus Texas offense. And I don't know. I'm going to have to put a little more thought into it. I tend to want to lean Michigan defense just because I think they are loaded everywhere, and I think that they're going to make it difficult for Quinn Ewers. But Texas offensively, they have a lot of weapons, and we know that he can sling the rock, and we know that, Texas has some wide receiver weapons that are going to get there. So Trent, we'll get into our game picks obviously on Friday, and we'll think more about this. But, to Bobby's question, what are your thoughts about this matchup between the Michigan defense and the Texas offense? Like, how do you see this thing going?
Yeah, I'm not real sure yet how I see it going, but I think the key for Michigan is keeping Quinn Ewers uncomfortable. I think you need to make the pocket collapse. Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, they need to have their best games yet. Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore need to do the same thing they did in week 1. Get him off balance, make him throw bad passes, stay aggressive, and when they make a mistake, make them pay for it. Take the ball down the field, score a touchdown. Just keep Texas on their heels. Don't let them get comfortable.
Agreed. Speaking of the defense, Tyrone from the Facebook page, I mean, this is something that I did see this being thrown around by a lot of people on social media. We know that Wink Martindale likes to be aggressive. He was aggressive Saturday night. Tyrone says he thinks that Michigan blitzes too much. Trent, you were up in the press box. You got a bird's eye view of it. Do you think Michigan was blitzing too much?
At times like that, the drive that they went down and scored a touchdown, we actually talked about this on Monday, but I thought that he got a little too blitz happy. He left his young corners on an island. Jair Hill got beat, I think, once. Jaden McBurrows got beat. So you're leaving these guys on an island by themselves. And obviously, if they get beat or they can't defend it, it's going to be an easy 10, 20-yard gain from the opposition. But again, that's what Wink Martindale likes to do, and he's going to, believe, live or die from being aggressive. And Michigan has the caliber of players that they can be fast and physical and aggressive doing it.
Yeah, 100%. Tyler from the Facebook page, he says, can Michigan's offense keep up with the Texas offense? He thinks that's the biggest question. No, I don't think it can, but I don't think that that's what needs to happen, Tyler. I mean, I really do think it's Michigan's defense. Put it this way, if Texas comes into Ann Arbor and they put 52 points on the board, is Michigan's offense going to match 52 points? I don't think so. I don't think that that's what's going to happen. So the real question and the real battle comes down to the Texas offense versus the Michigan defense. If the Michigan defense can win that battle, and I don't know what the number needs to be. I don't even know if this is the appropriate time to talk about it, but I don't know if it's, I mean, I guess it would kind of give away our, maybe to an extent, but I don't know how many people are listening. I mean, about 100 people in here. Not about score prediction, but let me ask you this, Trent. What do you think Michigan defense needs to hold the Texas offense to in order to give Michigan a shot at winning this game? Like if Texas can't score more than X for Michigan to win this game, what do you think that number is?
If Texas gets over 30, I think Michigan could be in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in the Texas defense, I think is going to be better than Fresno State. I mean, I'm leaning 28. You start to get into that range, pretty much right around 30. But yeah, you start to get up there, and I think you're going to have some issues. And we can say Darren May says shutout. Travis is saying,
wouldn't that be something? What if they did shut him out? What if it was 3-0? What if it's just a defensive struggle?
I mean, anything is possible, but look we're pretty much all in agreement. Travis from the Facebook page says 24 points. Tyler says no more than 21 points. Jacob from the Facebook page is saying 27-ish. No more than 28. That's Austin from the Facebook page. Bobby from the Facebook page is saying 20 is the magic number. I mean, we all seem to be in the general vicinity, right? And to Trent's point, if Texas gets into the 30s, that's not good, because it shows that the Michigan defense is struggling to keep Texas from putting points on the board. And now you're putting a lot of pressure on the Michigan offense to keep up. And I just don't think that that's a good place to be. So yeah, Tyler, that really is the battle right there. The Michigan defense versus the Texas offense. How is that going to play out? And I think if Michigan can keep Texas from, even saying 28, that feels strong to me. I'm starting to lean more towards the people that said 20, 21 points. Like, I really do think it's got to be that for Michigan to be in a good spot and do what they want to do offensively, not have to switch things up, be able to rely on the running game and go about your business and play within the system. If not, and you put, Davis Warren in a situation where big noon kickoff in front of Matthew McConaughey over wearing a cowboy hat on the sideline where you got to sling it around, that could be a dicey situation for the Michigan offense. So yeah, I might say 21. That seems to be the magic number.
Yeah, Michigan doesn't want to go into the game where they have to keep up with Texas offense. That's for sure. They've got to slow it down.
Yeah, Alan from the YouTube page, he says you can't be doing that weird subbing either. I mean, we didn't really talk much about that, but Michigan was making some substitutions and sort of switching some things out, and we saw that there was, some drives where Makari Page and Will Johnson and the defensive backs were on the sidelines and swapping some out. So like, two-part question. Were you fine with that? Like, I think it was by design. Were you fine with that? And do you think that was just a week one thing? Or do you think that this is what Michigan wants to do, that we're going to see some subbing out on the offensive line and we're going to see some, a lot of rotation in the secondary? How much of what we saw in week one do you think was just trying to figure it out and get your guys established for week two versus we're probably going to see that moving forward?
I have the concern with the secondary. I counted by the middle of the second quarter, Michigan played 10 different defensive backs. And by that time, we're talking about guys like Miles Pollard was in the game. He got beat. Some of these guys who have been around the program, but they're 9th, 10th for a reason. And I'm okay with guys like Wesley Walker. He should definitely have some sort of a role playing. But I think they've got to shrink that number some. I think you should never take Will Johnson out of the game unless he's gassed. Like he should be playing. Makari Page should always be playing. I even think Quentin Johnson should be on the field most of the time. So I do think, especially against an opponent like Texas, you need your best on best.
I agree, and we brought it up when we did the Monday show, but obviously we didn't talk about it here. Will Johnson does have stitches in his finger. I don't know when that happened or how that happened, but he talked about on that that game-winning interception where he sort of stumbled right out of the gate, but he kept his footing, kept it going the other way. Like he's got stitches on his middle finger, I believe, on his right hand, and so. Did that play a part in sort of the subbing in and out? I don't really think so because Makari Page was over there with him. And by and large, Michigan was really subbing guys out there in the secondary. So I do think it was a week one thing. Try to figure out what you got where because that you're not going to be able to make mistakes against that Texas offense. I don't think we're going to see that much of a rotation, but certainly, up front on the defensive line, a guy like Rayshawn Benny had an incredible performance there. You know what you're going to get out of Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Josiah Stewart. I mean, talk about needing to give a guy his flowers defensively. Josiah Stewart, I feel like people just sort of take him for granted, right? He's quiet in the way he goes about his business. We saw him in the post-game press conference. He walked up to the table and he basically just sat there for like 30 minutes and nobody was asking him a question. I think he leaned over and asked Dave, he's like, can I just go? Like, do I have to sit here for it?
Can I get out of here?
It was all Colston Loveland. It was all Davis Warren. It was all this and that. But Josiah Stewart, I mean, he is fast. He is physical. He is extremely disruptive. And I think that tandem of Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore on the edge, we've talked about this a number of times. It might be a slight upgrade from what Michigan had on the edge last year. And it was pretty special with guys like Jalen Harrell and Braden McGregor in that group. So, overall, I mean, thoughts there up front. I know that you were a little bit underwhelmed by what you saw from Kenneth Grant, but this offensive line, we talked about it. This is the bread and butter of the Michigan defense right here. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore. How would you rate what you saw from those guys week one?
Yeah, I was super high on the front four. And I think Kenneth Grant probably had one of his worst performances being a player at Michigan. But I say that loosely because I just think that Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore was that good. And I think Rayshawn Benny came in was that good for them, which I just think that front four is just going to be they're going to wreak havoc all season long.
Yeah, Cam Brandt, another guy, solid. TJ Guy, who we heard a lot of good things about. I mean, dude, that guy got hit with probably one of the worst penalties you'll ever see in college football. I mean, that roughing the passer. What did that take away? It took away the interception from Makari. Was that what it was?
Makari's was the one that hit the ground, right?
No, that was Quentin Johnson.
Okay, so then it would have been Makari's then, yeah.
Yeah, Makari Page's interception. Yeah, that was terrible call, but these are guys that I think are, again, just trying to find their rhythm, and I think they're going to be just fine. But I don't really have any concerns with the defensive unit at all from what I saw on week one, and certainly Matt Kirby. We haven't talked about him yet. Jayshawn Barham, he's terrifying. This guy is absolutely terrifying. I was down on the sideline for as big as he is, outside of his uniform, when he puts on the shoulder pads and he's got the helmet on, and you're down standing on the field next to this guy. he just looks terrifying. And I'm telling you, man, he is quick. He is fast. He is physical. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. He likes to get chippy and sort of, do a little extracurricular after the play is over. He doesn't mind getting in the mix. Like, I'm very excited for what we're going to see from number one on the defense. Even that number, like, it just looked good on him. He looked really good in the linebacker role. Anything you want to say about Jayshawn Barham, the first opportunity we had to watch him play as a Michigan Wolverine, the transfer from Maryland?
Yeah, I think the collective, what everybody was saying in the booth was just wow. Just watching this guy run, tackle. He really looks like one of those big linebackers you would see at Alabama or LSU, and he's up in Ann Arbor playing for Michigan.
Dude, he looks like he could play offense. I mean, you could put him at the running back. You could put him at tight end. Like, he just looks like one of those super creative players in like college football where you could just do whatever the hell you want with him. Yeah, man, I'm very excited for what he brings to this defense. And I think that's maybe where we'll sort of shore up the conversation, because ultimately, I think what we're going to find out about Michigan on Saturday against a team like Texas is that matchup, the Michigan defense versus the Texas offense. We know that the Michigan offense has things that it needs to work on. But by and large, the Michigan defense is a veteran group. They are a talented group, and they've got depth all over the place. We're going to find out, is this Michigan defense good enough to keep the Wolverines in every single game that they play this year? You have USC coming to town. You've got Oregon coming to town. You got to go on the road to Washington, and you got to go on the road to play the Buckeyes. We, going into this season, have thought this Michigan defense is going to give the Wolverines a chance every single Saturday. We're going to find out this Saturday whether or not that's true, and it's going to be against the Texas Longhorns. And that is what I'm excited about the most, man. I think if the Michigan defense can keep the Wolverines in it, keep the Longhorns under, 24 points or so, that Michigan offense is going to have an opportunity to get the win. Trent, what are you looking for as we are now over an hour, 10 minutes? We're going to start to close out the show. What are you looking forward to most? What are you going to be keeping your eye on this weekend when Michigan squares off against Texas?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think most people thought this Michigan defense was going to be a top 5, top 3 defense once again in college football. And I do believe that if Michigan's going to be a 10-11 win team, that they need this defense to step up and shut the opposition down. I mean, obviously, we want to see what Davis Warren's going to look like. We want to see what the offensive line will look like. We want to see the run game. But what if I had to choose one area, I want to see how this Michigan defense stacks up with one of the best offenses in college football and see which side wins.
Yeah, 100%. Hey, Jill from the Facebook page says she's driving up from Ohio to Ann Arbor to see the Texas-Michigan game.
Same here.
Maybe you'll pass Trent on the highway. Make sure you moon him if you see him. He's a 10-2 slow lane type driver guy. But yeah, man, I mean, that's anybody that's going to be in the big house on Saturday. This is one of those. I mean, there's a reason why College Game Day is going to be there. Big Noon Kickoff is going to be there. Barstool is going to be there. You've got celebrities coming out for it. Like, this is just going to be the center of the college football world. It's history. It's the first time these two teams are meeting in the regular season. Two just like premier brands in college football clashing in Ann Arbor for an epic top 10 non-conference game. Can't wait to be there. It's one of those things that just reminds you, Trent, we are blessed to be doing what we're doing here, and it's a privilege every single time we get to step into the big house and cover the Michigan Wolverines. We will be back on Friday. Shout out to the people in the fan section here. Like, I could not get through all of them. I am sorry. It's just a testament to how good you guys are, and we truly appreciate it. We will be back Friday with score predictions. We'll talk game. I mean, everything we need to do on Friday, we'll cover it then. 6 p.m. live right here Friday. We'll see you then. Trent, appreciate you.
Yep.
Taking a drag, now they're going to bed. Now my stomach is sick, and it's all in my head, but she's touching